This webinar is being recorded. By participating in this webinar, you agree that Angelique Mazel Robbins has all rights to this recording, and you grant her permission to use your image in any written or spoken comments you choose to offer during the course of the webinar in any manner she chooses. All right. Also going to record this audio. All right, everyone, thanks for being here. So the way that I'm going to do this webinar is the way that I do all of them, which is I'm going to sing a song that I was taught in my early 20s by the beings or energy, however you want to say it, that saved my life when I was 19. And after I sing that song, then you'll be having this conversation with me and the energy that saved my life, that introduced itself as Geschichte, which just means history. So any questions before I start? All right. So just close your eyes and relax. Om Say Savanata. Om Say Savanata. Ooh. Ooh. Hey. Seiken. Seiken. Ooh. Save no. Ooh. Or say, save no. Seiken. Hey. Onote. Hey. Onote. Akam. Ote. Ikam. Ote. Akam. Ote. Ikam. Ote. Hey. Onote. Hey. Onute. Oh, oh, ooh, so yen kenu. Oh, oh, ooh, so yen kenu. Nyam forti, nyam forti. Oh, oh, ooh, so yen kenu. Good evening, everyone. So good to see all of you. Thank you for attending this webinar where we will speak about human attachments, which it's interesting because less people are interested in human attachments, yet human attachments are the main kind of attachment. So let's kind of discuss what we mean by human attachment. Ultimately, what we mean by that is that there is some type of relationship where the one of the human beings is actually parasitic to the other one. And this occurs a lot in relationships. And by parasitic, we mean that one human being is actually feeding off of the energy of another human being. And so what happens in that kind of dynamic is that the person who's being fed off of will feel exhausted a lot of the time and not understand why they're feeling exhausted. They'll feel used. They'll feel alone, even though there's another person in the relationship. Depending on if that person is interacting with this other person a lot, the interactions themselves will feel exhausting. They won't feel uplifting. They'll feel like a strain, and it will be confusing. Often when a relationship is parasitic, it feels confusing. And in fact, one of the hallmarks of a healthy relationship is that there's clarity. So two people understand where they stand with each other, they communicate well. There's this theme of clarity. And with relationships that are parasitic, there's a theme of confusion. So one of the main ways you can start to discern in relationships, is this relationship healthy? Am I dealing with some type of parasitic dynamic here? Is to really assess whether or not you feel confused most of the time in the relationship, or even a lot of the time. And to start really asking yourself, what relationships feel clear to you? What relationships feel like there's a lot of clarity? And to kind of take the relationships that have clarity and put them on a shelf for you to remember a lot, so that when you are trying to figure out what other relationships are, you can kind of compare it to the energy of whatever relationship has clarity. Because whenever you have at least one relationship that feels healthy in this way, it's easier to take other relationships and kind of examine them and discern what's going on with them that's off. So how does this happen, where people become parasitic, or where we allow those to be parasitic off of us. How does that occur? And the main way that it occurs is through a specific type of splintering that occurs in the core of self. So unfortunately, in this world, in this reality, there is so much that splinters who we are. And so by the time we come into the world and our parents are raising us, we're actually being raised and taught by splintered people. So it's very difficult to even think about someone who is in a whole state, because we really don't grow up with many examples of anyone in a whole state. And through one person's fractured self, which means that someone is in a persistent state of pain in one way or another, they will then manipulate someone else in order to get whatever they're needing that they've lost through that fracturing, and thus end up fracturing someone else. So this can happen in a multitude of ways, and it happens just in general with our society also, just the way that everything is set up. But some extreme examples would be, like sexual abuse. And unfortunately, many people have been sexually abused, and one of the things that it does is splinters someone's core. And the younger it happens, the worse usually that actually is. And so what happens when a core is splintered? Let's talk about some of the things that are immediately affected when a core is splintered like that. So let's use an extreme example like sexual abuse, because it's really easy to see that it's happening there. And then we can kind of move it out and show how it happens even in things that you might not think are doing it. But in sexual abuse, one of the things that happens is, especially when it happens to a child, is that the child internalizes the abuse as their own fault. So when they internalize the abuse as their own fault, what do you think that does to their idea of self? It demolishes it. Because when you hold yourself accountable for something as heinous as that, there's no way to actually have a high opinion of yourself. So one of the first things that happens through sexual abuse is a complete demolishing of self-esteem, self-worth, and of self-respect. And those three things, self-esteem, self-worth, self-respect, those are actually the foundational pieces of boundaries, of energetic boundaries. So it's like, if those are not intact, then there is so many ways into the person, specifically through manipulation. And when we're speaking of activity that's parasitic, there's always an element of manipulation to it. Because when someone is parasitic, that means that that individual doesn't know how to, either they don't know how to, or they've chosen not to. They don't know how to generate their own energy. They don't know how to generate their own sustainability, so they seek it out in others in one way or another. And often it's very unconscious. They don't even know they're doing it, but they'll pick out, what someone's needs are. They'll identify it quite easily. Oh, this is your need. If I could convince you that you need me to fulfill that need in you, then I've got you. And if I can convince you that you need me, then I can draw energy off of you, and I can justify the fact that I'm doing it. All right. So that's the unconscious spoken energy of someone who's manipulating. And it doesn't really matter who's doing the manipulating. That is the unspoken energy of manipulation. So even if it's something as simple as, I'm an artist and I want to get into an art gallery. And I know that the owner of that art gallery likes landscapes. And I don't really care about doing landscapes. I can, but I don't care about it. But I know that if I do the landscapes, I'll be able to get into that gallery because the gallery needs landscapes to sell because that's their audience. So in that kind of world, it's not thought about as manipulation. That's just like, well, I have to make money, so I'm going to paint landscapes and then I can sell them at this gallery. But if you really look at the energetic components of that, it's actually manipulation because it's not authentic to the individual. I'm not creating landscapes because I'm like, that is what I'm passionate about. That's what needs to happen. Landscapes. And then I can find the galleries that actually like landscapes. That would be the healthy way to do it. But when you're trying to fit a particular thing that you see and it's not authentic, then that's some type of manipulative energy going on. So that's just a really simple way to see it. But ultimately, manipulation is convincing someone else that they need you for whatever reason. And it's never okay. It's really not, because for relationships to be healthy, the interactions really need to be about choosing one another. Yes, people need each other for different things. And it's okay when two people know that they need each other for specific things, and it's a straightforward need. And it's specific roles that people have that they know they have, they choose to have them, they choose to interact with those roles. And so the entire thing is conscious and voluntary and agreed upon, then the energy is clear and clean, right? That two people then know where they stand. But when the needs are below the surface, not spoken about, and two people are using each other to fulfill specific needs, and they're not actually choosing each other because they want to choose each other, they're just using each other to get specific needs met, then you've got parasitic activity going on. So before we go any further, does anyone have any questions about everything that's been said so far? And if you do, just unmute yourself and talk. Is everyone understanding this so far? And is it
very clear for me? That was very clear.
excellent? Excellent. So let's talk about the worst kind of parasitic activity, right? The kinds that make people feel the absolute worst. And that is the kinds where the person had the manipulator has specifically located the weakest aspects of another person, realizing that in those very weak aspects, that's where the greatest need sits. So the greatest need is to be to feel important, or to feel accepted, or to feel loved. And instead of being able to genuinely meet those needs, the person pretends to meet those needs in order to create dependency from the person who has the need. Because once dependency is established, then the ability to draw life force from that individual is easy. Because the ability to draw life force off of someone happens through dependency. So there's kinds of dependency that are healthy, right? So like obviously a baby or a child is dependent upon its parents because in many ways it's helpless. And even parents can exploit that, or they can nurture that and help the child to grow into a strong, autonomous individual. So, and that's important, strong, autonomous individual. So when you're looking at a relationship where it seems like no matter what I do, I'm not seemingly becoming any stronger or more autonomous in this relationship. In fact, it feels like I'm becoming weaker and weaker. So in what's called narcissism, which is a specific type of personality disorder that it's pretty nasty. And in fact, quite a lot of people have those traits in the world today because our world's set up to foster it and to nurture it. But in those types of personalities will actually create a dependency with another person to such a degree that perhaps the individual, when they first got with the person with narcissism, was pretty well established, quite able to take care of themselves, maybe has pretty good self-esteem, and they meet the person starts to just shower them with all kinds of attention and love and gifts and offerings, and does all kinds of sweet things for them. Like we had a client who had a boyfriend who was coming over and feeding her dogs and taking out her trash and doing all this stuff that she wasn't asking for. And it was very nice. But what that kind of person is actually doing is they're overdoing something on their end to create dependency in the other person, so that the little by little the other person goes, oh, I guess I need that person to do that for me. Or they that part of themselves atrophies, so they're no longer carrying their own groceries or opening their own doors or all these little kinds of things, to where in their mind they go, well, this other person is doing all of this for me, isn't he so great? And then what will happen as that kind of relationship keeps going is the person who had this type of autonomy and whatnot is able to do less and less and less, and feels resentment over it, but can't quite figure out why, because the other person is just being nice. And then an argument happens, and everything that person was doing for the other one comes up in arguments. Look what I've done for you. Look what I do for you. I bust my ass for you, blah, blah, blah. And so what's actually happening energetically is, although that person is doing all of these things for the other one, they're not actually doing those things just because they want to do those things, because they want to be kind to someone else or show someone else affection. They're doing it to get something back. And so that is one of the main things when you're trying to figure out if a dynamic is healthy, is to really examine and to trust yourself when you're examining it. Like, when someone does something for me, or when someone gives something to me, does it feel like a genuine gift? Or does it feel like there's some kind of strings attached? Because when it feels like there's strings attached, that's manipulation, even if that person completely denies it.
But shouldn't there be an exchange in a relationship? Like, you're nice to me and I'm nice to you, and we're helping each other out. That's part of a relationship.
Of course. But people that are just being nice to each other, they don't hang it over each other's heads. Right? So you don't make dinner for your husband and family and then go, I made dinner for you. Right? Like, you should do this for me, because you should have sex with me because I made dinner for you. That's a dynamic that happens a lot of times. Usually doesn't happen with women. But
I guess in those times I am being manipulative.
but surely you guys have had relationships where it feels like that, where there's relationships where you do things for each other and it's just cool and it just feels good, and you can feel that you just do it because you want to. And there's relationships where something's been done for you and you're like, oh crap, they did something for me, now I'm gonna have to pay them back in some way. And who knows if the way I can pay them back is actually going to be sufficient to whatever they think they should be getting paid back for that. That's parasitic. That's when a relationship has become parasitic. So let's give a different example. Some children become parasitic of their parents. How does that occur? Well, as a parent, there's a process of allowing a child to go, allowing a child to become more and more autonomous. And often when a child becomes parasitic, it's because the parent did not go through the process of allowing their children to become autonomous, or even teaching them to become autonomous. And so they fostered a relationship where the child was still drawing off of the energy of the parent when they should be generating it for themselves. And how does that occur? That's an interesting kind of step-by-step process of a parent really being able to watch a child as he or she is growing and allow them to make decisions on their own, allow them to make mistakes, allow them to completely mess up, allow them to act completely stupid, and to suffer their own consequences. So one of the main ways that parents create dependency far beyond when there should be any dependency is by not allowing their children to suffer their own consequences. And if you start to look at relationships that are really unhealthy, you'll see that theme over and over again. And it doesn't always happen with just parents and children. It also happens with husband and wives, and brothers and sisters, and friends, and people in work environments, where someone is taking responsibility for another person. And in fact, the other person they're taking responsibility for actually needs to be taking responsibility for themselves. But since they're in that dynamic where one person is going, oh, I'll be responsible for you, then they go into an enabled state and start to agree with it. Like, oh, yes, you want to be responsible for me? Sure, that's great. You be responsible for all of these things. And I don't have to be accountable for these things. And you've got a parasitic dynamic going on where the person who's taking the responsibility actually often started it. So anytime you're taking responsibility for someone else, you are enabling a parasitic relationship. You're literally enabling yourself to be sucked of energy. And why does that happen? How does that happen? If you really start to examine how that happens, one of the main ways that we see it happening is through pity. So people really confuse compassion and pity. They're two energies that are very similar, but very different, in fact. So they feel kind of similar, but they're very different, because compassion still allows someone their consequences or their choice or their experience. Pity gets in the middle of someone else's experience and feels the responsibility and the weight of it. And if you really allow yourself to go into an experience of pity, you'll find that the mental processing that goes along with the energy of pity is, I don't think you're capable. of following through with this in a way that's going to be healthy for you, or I don't think you're capable of healing this, or I don't think you're capable of being accountable or responsible for this. And so something happens within you that goes, well, I guess I need to carry the weight of that. And of course, none of this is happening the way that we're saying it, like you're sitting there thinking it, but it's happening on a deeper level where if you perceive that someone can't handle themselves in one way or another, you actually start to take accountability for that person. And when you do that, you have created a parasitic dynamic. Doesn't matter if it's with a spouse, a child, a sibling, a coworker, it doesn't matter. If you're cleaning up for someone else in one way or another, you've got a parasitic dynamic going on. And to go back to the whole example of narcissism, that happens a lot in those type of dynamics, because often the person with those traits is a liar. They're usually quite a con artist, and someone who's close to them is consistently seeing their emotional immaturity and the way they will wreak havoc on different relationships, whether it's professional or personal, and they'll constantly be trying to make excuses and cover things up and make things okay, and play nursemaid to the entire dynamic that's going on all the time around this other person. And that is a good example of, yes, it's on Zoom. Mary
I don't have
Sear.
access to your Zoom.
Okay, hang on, I'll send it to you. Someone can't get in. I wonder why she couldn't get in. Did all of you receive the link twice?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so where were we in that? What were we saying?
You were at
We're
going
talking
back
about how pity, what happens, how pity manifests in terms of it's spiritual.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the energy of pity is different from the energy of compassion, because pity, the unspoken aspect of pity is, I do not believe you're capable of doing whatever it is that needs to be done. So what is that? Could be healing, could be accomplishing some type of task, doesn't really matter. But in essence, it's not being able to believe in someone else. And anytime pity is present, you've got a parasitic dynamic going on. So we want to know that that's a really complex thing to comprehend. So we want to know if you guys have any questions on that before we go deeper into that. And do you feel like you can really go inside yourself and really discern the difference between compassion and pity?
Yes, I can now. Over the past year, I think I was in that type of a situation. And I mean, I've been on both. I've been the kind of the victim and the, I guess you would say, a perpetrator. I hate to say it like that, but yeah, it's interesting to look at it from both angles.
So what helped you to really discern it, Ellen?
Well, working with you. Seriously. Seriously. I mean, it's like the light bulb went on one day and I said, you know, I'm trying to take care of a person because I think nobody else is taking care of her. And this was a young adolescent thinking I was helping her out, but you know, I think I cared more than she did, or I just didn't really let her take care of herself. And things didn't really change over years. So I finally walked away, and it was very freeing. But I don't think I understood it when I was in it until afterwards. And this has been really helpful to kind of put it in that perspective because it's so true.
Yeah. And all these words are used, like compassion, pity, and we all know the words, but are we really evaluating what they mean? And are we really evaluating the ability for ourselves to remain independent and autonomous from another? And are we able to allow someone else to remain independent and autonomous, even if we're watching them going, man, you're seriously screwing up. Like you are on a runaway train to nowhere. Even if we see that, the only way that we can make sure that that relationship does not become unhealthy and parasitic is to go, well, the runaway train that you're on is yours, and it is not my place to make decisions for you. It's actually my place to be honest with you. So this moves us into the yes, go ahead, Pamela.
I work with somebody who does a program called Next Step. And it's the next step to get people from where they are to where they're trying to get to. This person is full of compassion for them, but she doesn't pity them. She meets them where they are and she holds them accountable and responsible for them to get to a place. But in all of that, she's loving and she's kind with them. But it's amazing how she sets the boundary and people really know that she cares for them. But she's not pitying them.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And what is that piece that really will set you apart from pity and compassion? The way that you can really kind of test where you are with it is really be able to ask yourself honestly, am I taking responsibility for this person? Am I taking responsibility for their choices? Do I feel like somehow I am so important that I must make choices on their behalf? Because that's when we move into our own narcissistic traits, is when we impose who we are into someone else's life. Like, well, if I was doing it for you, it would be a lot better. And thus in some type of parasitic dynamic. But can we, in addition to that, can we be honest with someone? So if you choose to stay in some kind of relationship where you notice that you're continually moving into pity, and by that we mean you're moving into this very obvious belief structure that goes, you know, every time I look at you, I just feel freaked out because I really don't think that you are capable of making any good decisions for yourself. Then we have to assess, okay, that is the marker where I start to step into the territory of taking accountability for someone else. And if I'm going to be moving into the territory of taking accountability for someone else, I'm creating a parasitic dynamic. I'm going to end up enabling someone and prohibiting them from being able to become a fully autonomous and independent individual. And then we have to examine, why am I doing that? And maybe I'm doing it because I'm afraid, because I love that person. I don't want to lose them. So this happens a lot with parents and kids, especially if the kid's like on drugs. And like one of the things we saw when I was growing up was the different people, guys who played sports, whenever they would drive drunk or get in accidents, which seemed to happen quite a bit, the parents would cover up the whole thing so that they would still be able to play the sport or whatever. And that's a good example of not allowing someone their own consequences. And a lot of times the parents are doing that because they don't want the consequence themselves of having to deal with whatever consequence the child has to deal with. Right? So of course there's the element of losing the child. That's scary enough. But there's also the less scary consequences of, you know, getting kicked out of school or being on the street or not being able to play the sport or looking bad in the community or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But if we examine, why am I feeling the need to take accountability for this individual or cover up for them in some way, and in some way not allow them their own consequences? If we can really examine that and find out if we're behaving in a way that's doing that, then we can actually pull it home, meaning pull it back into ourselves and go, all right, this has now become my issue. This actually doesn't have anything to do with them. This has become my issue. I'm having a hard time allowing this person their consequences because I'm afraid to lose them or whatever it is. And once that's identified, then to actually work with that element within oneself, like hold oneself accountable for working out whatever that issue is, so that you're not involving someone else and entangling someone else in whatever your fear is. Because when you do that, you also create a parasitic dynamic. You're creating someone to become parasitic with you by giving them the message that they're not capable of living their own life. And of course, many times we're going to look at someone and think that, because we're going to watch people screw up over and over again and seem incapable of living their own life. But it's their life. And if they don't fall and crash and burn and whatever, and if they don't get to experience their own consequences, then we ensure that they experience consequences down the line that are even worse. So, for example, my boyfriend in high school, who his parents got him off from drink driving, getting in a car crash, covered all that up, and covered up a few things after that. A couple years after he graduated high school and had a daughter and a wife, he was selling cocaine, and then he got put in prison. And he was in prison for many years. So he wasn't allowed to learn from the consequence that he could have had the first time, which might have straightened him up. Might not have, but it might have. And so the next time it was even worse. And there was no way for him to be saved from that consequence. He had to deal with that consequence. So that's just a general example of why it's not a good idea to try to take responsibility or accountability for someone else's bad life choices. Not only because it's going to create worse consequences for them down the line if they don't learn from their current ones, but in addition, it's going to create a very unhealthy dynamic between you and the other person, because you're taking accountability for their mistakes. And so in their mind, you start to be a scapegoat, which is really backwards, but that's what happens. So do you guys have any questions on that segment?
I do. I love this because I realize a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is subconscious for all of us. And this is opening our subconscious to it. But I'm just wondering how this relates to, like, when you're in a relationship and your spouse or your friend or whatever accuses you of something that you can see, but they don't see, but they still accuse you of you being that way when it's really not you, it's them. Or they're not communicating or getting you or understanding you. I think you understand my question, don't you?
Yeah, but can you give like a more detailed example?
Okay. I'm saying something to my husband, and it's almost like it's turned around as though I was like the perpetrator when I'm trying to point something out. He's not seeing it clearly. Like, I guess I'm thinking I'm seeing it the way I'm seeing it, which is I'm also feeling it, not just seeing it, but feeling it and trying to point it out and make it clear. But it's turned around against me. Like I'm the one that created this or started this, or it's a touchy place. Like there's no real clarity. The communication isn't, there's nothing, how can I say this? I'm trying to communicate it, but somehow he doesn't see it. So he turns it against me that I'm causing it. But I'm seeing the whole thing playing out, and I'm trying to explain or tell him how I feel about it, what I'm seeing. And I'm the wrong person. I'm wrong. And I'm not saying he is, but I'm just trying to point something out, making a point or helping to clear something up. But he tries to make it sound like, oh, you're creating more problems. I'm not. I want to talk about this because if I ask questions and I have a lot of information, then I don't make stories up. So I'm seeing how this can be turned around against me.
Does this happen often?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a pretty common dynamic when someone doesn't want to take accountability for themselves.
Yeah, that's what I got when you were talking about this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is that what it feels like when you're dealing with it?
Yes, very much.
Yeah, so that's difficult because when you're dealing with someone who doesn't want to be accountable for themselves, and you want to know how you can always be sure that a parasitic dynamic will occur when you're dealing with someone who does not want to be accountable for themselves. The only way that it doesn't occur is if the only way that it doesn't occur is if can you guys all mute yourselves? Make sure someone's not muted, but we can't tell who it is. When when the person who doesn't want to be accountable for themselves interacts with the other one has a choice, which is to go ahead and take the accountability or take the responsibility that's being thrust upon them, or reject it. And when the person rejects it, that's when you start to have a lot of fighting. So this happened a lot in my first marriage, where I was married to someone who did not ever want to be accountable for himself. And so he was constantly, anytime I would point out something that was occurring, something that needed addressed or corrected, he would turn it around onto me as though it was my fault, or I was seeing it wrong, or I was trying to, blame him for something that wasn't his fault, or he'd come up with excuses. Well, that's because blah, 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 blah. Never was it an integrating process of, I didn't see it that way. I didn't realize it was happening that way. I need to look at that. Or even if I was playing a part in it, I can see what you're seeing, definitely, but also this is what you're doing. So we're both contributing. Like, just some kind of healthy interaction like that would have been cool, but it never occurred. And for a while, I would take accountability for things and try to clean up things for him. And then I started realizing, after a long enough time, that the theme that I saw with him was that he was never freaking accountable for anything. And that I had started to make a habit out of being accountable for him, because somebody had to be, if we were going to be taken seriously in business interactions and personal relationships, or any kind of setting like that, or any kind of friendship settings, or just anything. One of us had to actually be paying attention to dynamics that were occurring and trying to do something about it. And since I perceived that he wasn't going to, then I decided I would have to. And I really had it in my head, if I take accountability enough, like, it will start to rub off, and he will start to learn how to do that, and he'll improve, and blah, 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 which was totally delusional, absolutely delusional. It never occurred. He never cared to do that. But when we said at the very beginning of this that one of the ways you know that there's some type of parasitic activity occurring is through confusion. Any relationship that feels perpetually confusing, that's what we're talking about. Because in a situation where you observe a thing and then you point out the thing that you're observing, someone who is in a sane mindset, or someone who's in an accountable mindset, will actually listen to what's being said and go, okay, I see how you're perceiving that. I don't agree maybe with this part or that part, but I see how you're perceiving that. Let's solve this together. Here's how we can do these things. Here's certain things I can do to correct this. Here's certain things maybe you could do to correct this. And perhaps we can correct this entire dynamic by doing this thing together, if it's something to do together. Sometimes it's not something to do together at all. And that's clarity. That's when a dynamic is being worked through, untangled, and organized, because that's really what's happening when you observe a thing and you bring it to someone's attention, like, hey, this is something I'm observing. If we approach it like blah, 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 we can bring some cohesion to this, some peace to this, and not keep perpetuating the dysfunction. That's a clarity mindset where you're problem solving. But if someone's immediate response to your observation or your attempt to organize or solve a thing through your observation of a thing is to basically say that you're the problem for observing it, that's red flag that someone just doesn't want to be accountable. And so That's in general the energy of avoidance, and the energy of avoidance causes more and more and more confusion, and more and more and more chaos. And the only choice you have if you're dealing with someone like that is to really get clear with yourself about what you're observing. Because when you have it thrown in your face constantly, like whatever you're observing is actually your fault, one of the points of doing that is actually to keep you busy analyzing yourself. Because if you're busy analyzing yourself, because you're good at taking accountability for yourself, so someone's pointing out, actually, this is you, and you go, okay, maybe it is. Let me look at that. Now you're busy analyzing yourself, and the other person is off the hook for a little while longer until you figure out that that was bullshit and it's time to look at it more deeply again. And
You're
so,
hitting it right on the head. You're hitting it right on the head. Oh my God.
yeah, so what you end up doing is, really what we would recommend is start, even if it's just simple things that you're jotting down, but just start to keep a record of how often it's occurring, and just be as emotionally detached from the whole thing as possible so that you can actually write down your observations. Because the only thing that's going to win when someone is trying to manipulate you into being accountable for everything, the only thing that's going to win is for you to be observant and to start to really keep track of what you're observing. And then from that space of observing, you're going to have to get really honest with yourself about how you want to solve the problem that you're dealing with. Because most likely what you're going to figure out is that one of the main problems you're dealing with is that you're dealing with someone who doesn't want to be accountable. And so before you can even think about ironing out any of the shit that you're observing, you have to first iron out what I'm going to do about this relationship where I am not having a partner in accountability. Because energetically, that's like having an infant. So that's square one. But what you have to do within yourself is get really clear and just go, for a little while, I'm going to observe what's really going on here. And I'm going to observe everything equally. So I'm going to observe this individual. I'm going to observe whatever the dynamics are that I'm seeing a problem with, and I'm going to observe myself. And I'm going to take notes about all of it. And I'm going to work out what's really happening here. And then I'm going to have a conversation with this other person and see if they're interested in having some type of accountability. And if they're not, then I'm going to have to make a decision in a totally different direction, because a relationship where one person is accountable and the other one isn't a relationship. It's prison.
Angel, I wanted to ask you something. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. What about a teenager who is not a child that you can kind of make do what you want them to do for their own good? Not an adult who can be responsible, doesn't have the knowledge to presumably make responsible decisions. For example, my daughter is choosing to wear these AirPods all the time, even though I've said these emit a ton of radiation. These are dangerous. Don't do this. Someone gave them to her for her birthday. Now her hair's falling out. And I'm like, well, you're radiating your brain constantly. And it could be that. And at first she was interested in hearing that and believing that. And then she's still rejecting that. And it's like, in terms of your saying they need to accept their consequences and be responsible for what happens. It's like, she's still my daughter. She's still, someone that I'm technically responsible for, and I see her like going down this pathway of like radiating her brain. So it's just, I can't really make her do what I want her to, but I also don't feel comfortable just saying, well, see you when you get cancer. That'll suck, you know.
Well, it's a different scenario because she is still a child, still in your care. And you're talking about health, so it's a little bit of a different consequence. Interestingly, some of the same things do apply if you think about it, because for her to really actually become accountable for her own health, what has to happen?
I got it. I hear you, but it's like we're talking cancer. You know, these Apple products are so dangerous, and the kids must have them. You know, they give them to each other if the parent won't buy them. So, I mean, I don't want to see Jasmine get really sick, but it's almost like she watched her hair falling out, and then she's just like, well, my mom's crazy. She's full of shit. It can't be that. Let me just go back, you know.
Well, and the problem that you're dealing with too is that even if you took those, she might just get another pair. So that's the issue with teenagers, isn't it? Because it's like the more you try to impose your will upon them, the more they move in the opposite direction. The more they impose their will upon you at their own expense. So with her, if conversations about it aren't making a difference, if, you know, when you speak to her, what do you say?
Those emit a lot of radiation. What I should have done is buy an EMF meter and just show her the reading, but she would call that bullshit too, like that adult who just rejects, denies. Oh, that's crazy. That's wrong. Haven't done that yet, but I tell her they're dangerous. They emit a ton of radiation, like 400 times more than is safe. Nobody knows it. Nobody cares. Don't wear them.
So what happens,
know.
what happens if you just take them?
She's on mute.
I don't like Zoom. She hates that. Angel, she hates it if I take her stuff. She's super defensive about that. She, you know, will resist and start fighting that and dig her heels in. It's not good, you know, for me to do that, which is why she has them at all.
But those are literally your only choices. Either you take them or you let her wear them.
Right.
So if you're going to move that into your own accountability space, what do you do with that? If you're moving that into your own accountability space, because she's still your child living in your house, when you pull that into your accountability space, which one feels like the right thing to do?
It's easy to judge that situation and say, oh, take them away, don't let her have them, take the iPhone, throw that thing in the trash. Yes, but you know, Jasmine doesn't react well to that sort of thing, and you know, has already made a decision that takes it too far when I take things away from her. So yes, I'm manipulated into letting her have that stuff. And I can take responsibility for that. But
so she holds you hostage through
yeah, of course she does.
Through your fear of her harming herself.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, she does.
So then the energy that you have to work with there is your own fear of losing her. That's the energy that's yours to work with, because that's what she's manipulating you with. That's where your boundary exists. So Mary, thank you for bringing this up, because this is it's a really amazing example of what we're talking about. And it's extreme enough to where we can talk about it in a way for everyone to understand what we're talking about in regard to parasitic activity. So you're being held hostage through your own fear, and she knows it. So she uses your fear to get what she wants. Unfortunately, she uses it through harming herself, which is a really serious way to manipulate someone. But a lot of people, in fact, do that. And of course, her issue for her to deal with is her own lack of self-esteem and definitely lack of self-love and self-respect. That's her issue to deal with. And then your issue to deal with is your fear of losing her, because you know that those issues are her issues. So you're not in a state of denial about what you're dealing with. You're dealing with someone who's having a hard time and experiencing plenty of hatred for themselves, and will use that to punish you or to manipulate you, which holds you in a hostage space. And what's going to happen eventually is that some part of you is going to break, because this happens with everyone who deals with someone who's being a terrorist to them in this way. Some part of you finally will go, fine, you do what you got to do, okay? Because here's the thing, Mary, whether she harms herself through radiation or she harms herself through some other means, she's in a space of harming self right now. And the only thing that's going to pull her out of that space is for her to come into a space where actually respecting herself and finding her own worth, exploring her own worth, cultivating her own worth is an important thing for her. As long as she doesn't care about those things, she will weaponize her own pain to hurt you. And it doesn't matter. She's going to figure out a way to weaponize it until she figures out that this is her life. That this isn't about you. This is about her actually getting to live her own life, and about her taking care of herself, and about her respecting herself and appreciating herself and loving herself and doing things that make her feel proud of herself. She has to come into that element of her own journey before she will stop terrorizing you. So there's literally nothing you can do to make her want to do that. That is her journey to figure out. Your journey is the ability to go, which is the hardest thing ever for a mother to do. But it's to be able to go, you know what? I can't be the one to make sure that you give a crap about yourself. I can't enforce self-love. I can't enforce self-care. I can't enforce self-respect. It's got to be something that you give a crap about. And so I release that energy to you to figure out. And though I am terrified of how you're going to harm yourself, because you seem hell bent on it, whether it's through radiation or whatever else, I don't have any control over it. And I can't try any longer to do it for you, to care for you, meaning on your behalf. How old is she at this point, Mary?
He's 16, and I agree with what you're saying. And I think I've gotten to that point, you know, the family therapy that we've done. And I hope this is benefiting the whole group. You know, following her suicide attempt has been to, you know, kind of teach me that I can't control what she wants to do. And by getting angry at her, you know, obviously that's just going to backfire. So, you know, yeah, I'm letting her, I've already actually told her, you know, you need to learn to take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your health. And so we'll see. But she is starting through the gifts of the universe, Angel, to experience things and get things that validate her. And, you know, through her art and her experiences, a lot of stuff has just opened up in ways that really don't make sense for how the world works. But all those things that she needs to do to develop her self-esteem and self-love are there before her, just like thrown on her path. And it's really cool for me to see. So I've got faith she'll figure it out. But what you just said is right. You know, she needs to figure out how to take care of herself, since she's growing up into a, you know, woman and is no longer a child. And but it's hard, you know. It's like you're saying, you know, kids who take drugs, like how do you make them stop doing that? You know, very hard.
You don't. That's
Yeah.
the thing, you don't. And that's why it's so difficult for a parent, because you go through life taking accountability for them when they're little, because you have to, because you can let them experience some consequences, but most of it you're going to, you know, make sure that they don't have to experience the consequence. Like, you don't let them stick a key in a socket, because the consequence of being electrocuted is not a good outcome. So take the key away. But as they get older, your ability to take the key away goes away, meaning they at some point have to start really being able to go, okay, when I do this thing, this is the consequence. And that's on me. And to allow them that experience. So we hear you about the whole cancer thing and hair falling out. At the same time, if her hair falls out and you've said it could be from the radiation, and she says, I don't care, then
It's more like, I don't believe you, you know, because it's coming from me. It's got to be some conspiracy bullshit. That can't be right. No, mom, you know, you're wrong. All my friends are right. So it's like, you know, and I guess these people might grow up into these partners, these men that I know who, like we've heard, refuse to take accountability. They always blame someone else. It's always someone else's fault. No, just like that denial of everything. I've known plenty of men like that. It's scary, you know, to me.
yeah. But in your situation, you're not left with that many choices. Either you go, you know, not in my house. You're not keeping those in your head the entire time you're in my house, because I'm not going to watch you get cancer. All right. Or you let her do it and experience whatever consequence that is. But either way, if you're making a decision to not take something away from her because you're afraid she's going to hurt herself, so you let her keep something that she's going to hurt herself with, it's like you're dealing with the same outcome either way, and you're going to feel guilty either way. So you can't win.
It sucks either way.
Sucks either way, which means that your only choice is to really start working to heal that aspect that allows you to be manipulated, so that when you have to make a choice like this, you're making the clearest choice for you. Because the best thing you can do for her is become a mother who can't be manipulated. So that she has to take accountability for herself.
Well, I think the best option here is to have a conversation with her that she can think whatever she wants, but the consequences, the most dire consequences of, for example, getting cancer, brain cancer, whatever kind of cancer, the consequences would only affect her, not me. So I might just buy an EMF reader and show her like what happens when you run that thing over those things. It just goes right off the chart, and just leave it at that. That is what I could do.
Yeah, you could do that. We still recommend working on that aspect of yourself that's able to be manipulated by her, because she's going to keep being a terrorist to you until you become someone who can't be manipulated by that stuff.
You're right. She's done it since she was a little kid. So you're right.
And it's a hard thing. And I know from experience, it's a hard thing to allow your child their own ridiculous path for when you're looking at it, and it's very ridiculous. But I can tell you from experience that it is quite an awesome thing to finally make a declaration to your child of, you know what? I love you with all my heart. I want the best for you in every single way. But I'm not you. You are you. You are the one who has to live with you. You're the one who has to make the choices for you. And you're the one who has to live with whatever consequences you have from whatever choices you make. And though your consequences will always affect me, because I'm your mother and I love you, I am not responsible for you. I allow you from this point forward to make choices for yourself and to take accountability for yourself about whatever those choices are. And from this moment forth, I am not taking accountability for the choices that you make. I said all that to my son, and I meant it. And I don't agree with everything that he's chosen. But it was the best thing I ever did for me and for him to let him go in that way. Because when I said it, I meant it. And I really did stop taking so much responsibility for whatever he was going through. I had it in my mind that every bit of his pain, every bit of his hardship, whatever, all of the things that I saw that were twirling down the toilet, I was taking responsibility for them. Somehow it was my fault about all of it because I'm his mom. And I went through a process of, okay, I am genuinely going to look at all of that, which is actually, in my court, like areas where I could have done better, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to internalize it, and I'm going to integrate it, and I'm going to accept it. And I'm going to know that, yeah, I could have done better in that area, and I didn't. And from this point forward, I will. But at some point, I must allow him to be accountable for his own dysfunction. Just like I, in my adulthood, am accountable for my dysfunction. No matter what kind of crap was done to me in my childhood, which was a lot, by the way, a lot of really fucked up stuff happened to me in my childhood. But I'm accountable for all of it now. And meaning that I'm accountable for how I deal with it. I'm accountable for who I become in response to it. I'm accountable for every choice I make And whether or not I justify some screwed up choice with some kind of pain from my history, I'm accountable for all of that. And so is he. And if I don't teach him that, if I don't teach him, yeah, there's areas I could have done better. Here they are. I'm going to be very honest about them. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And it's over now. And from this moment forth, I'm doing better. And now you have to figure out this dysfunction that lives in you, what you're going to do with it, how you're going to move forward with it, how you're going to respond to life in a way that makes you better, in a way that makes you proud of yourself. That's all on you. And the best thing I can do is let you go and allow you to experience that and work on myself in the area of believing in you. Because if I look at you and I'm going, man, you're a screw up. I can't even think about you taking any step in life or anything that doesn't make me feel like panic, then I need to work on that, because there's nothing I can admit to him that is beautiful and uplifting and inspiring and empowering and motivating and supportive if I'm in that space. So that's what I did. I let him go and I got to work on myself in regard to my own fear and projection of doom, and really started to figure out and come to a place where there was plenty about him that I saw as beautiful and inspiring and very capable. And it was in that ability to see him as capable that I got better and better and better at taking no accountability for whatever he was going through. Until we had a conversation a couple years later from that point, and he tried to make me accountable for some things on the telephone. And I said, yeah, I don't take accountability or responsibility for any of that. That was all your choice, and you're going to have to figure out how to work that in your head. But that's all on you, buddy. And that was the last conversation we had. And when I said that to him, last conversation we had about that kind of thing. And when I said that to him, I meant it. And from that point forth, he has really gotten his shit together. But I was able to remove myself in such a way to where it was like, whatever happens to him, I don't have any control over it. And the best thing I can do for him is believe in him. The best thing I can do is pick out the things that inspire me, make me believe in him, make me feel uplifted about him, make me feel like supporting him. And I can put my energy into those things and allow him to deal with his own dysfunction. And that's what I did. And our relationship has begotten a lot better. And he has become quite a responsible guy who he's doing well in college. He's already written his first book, and he's only 21 years old. So I know you can do it. And it's great advice for any parent to be able to come to that place where you go, you know, the time I had with you as a child to nurture you, to instill powerful thoughts about yourself, to instill the ability to discern this world, all of the things that we instill into our children. My time of doing that is pretty much over. And overall, I think I did whatever you think that is. For me, I am proud of what I did. I worked really hard to instill a lot of wonderful things in both of my children. And that was one of the things that actually gave me strength and confidence and an ability to believe in him. I knew I planted all of that. And I could choose to water that and feed it with energy, or I could choose to feed fear with energy. And I chose to water and feed the seeds that I knew I planted. But when you can look at your, when they become a teenager, although society says, they're still children, we're still responsible for them, they act like you're not responsible for them. They act like they want nothing to do with you. They act like their life is their own. And so there's that period of time where you got to start making that transition into, yeah, your life is your own. And you better get started now and making some good choices for yourself, because you're 16, you got 2 years before you are a legal adult. And then I really have no responsibilities. So yeah, start figuring it out now. And I am going to focus on that which I know I instilled. And I'm going to focus on the connection that I know I made. And I'm going to appreciate that which I focused on, that which I poured myself into, and trust that something good can come out of that, even if I can't fully see it now. And beyond that, I'm going to accept that if that's all I ever have, if that's the end for me, it's enough. And that's where I came to. I came to that place of, if that's all I ever get, if I never get to speak to you again, if you never want to see me again, if you die, if whatever, if that occurs, I still have the time that I poured myself into you, the time that you were a child, this whole time I still have, it's mine. And no one can take it from me. Your death can't take it from me. Any kind of failure you have can't take it from me. And I'm going to anchor and root myself there. And in doing that, I'm going to be able to let you go easier. So this is actually a good topic, not just for parents and children, but for anyone that you care about. Do you guys have any questions on this topic?
I just want to thank Mary for bringing that up. I think that was a great topic. Anyone with children.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Angel.
Thank you, Mary. It's not easy what you've been dealing with. So we've got half an hour left. We'd like to hear just some questions you guys have so that we can give you some more specific direction if you want it.
I have a question. Can you talk? Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about our role in working out whatever we have going on within ourselves to navigate these kind of relationships? And so I'm asking because I deal with this problem most at work, where I work with a wide range of people, many of whom refuse to be accountable for their actions. And I'm navigating it from like top down, like from my supervisor and from my colleagues, and like my supervisor not holding my colleagues accountable, my colleagues not holding themselves accountable, and me kind of being left to figure it out. And in this conversation, I had a bit of an epiphany of like, oh, maybe what they're taking advantage of is my desire to show up for work every day and do a really good job, right? And so they'll know, oh, it doesn't matter what crap I bring to Leah will figure it out. And so like it would be great if I could begin to think through outside of just like saying, no, these are the rules and this is what, you know, how we should all, everybody should be living up to the same rules or being accountable to the same rules, what I have going on within myself, so I don't drive myself crazy with all the crazy people I work with. I don't know if that's super clear.
Well, that's difficult, isn't it? Because when you're in an environment of a bunch of people who don't want to be accountable, and you're one of the people that is fine with being accountable, that it's one of the things that always happens in dynamics where there's one person who's really good at being accountable is that all of those around them try to make them accountable when they're lazy. And so if we were in your position in regard to other people trying to make you accountable or clean up their shit, we would do something similar to what we spoke of earlier, which is become very observant in regard to what is different people's job to achieve. And if you're noticing that other people's jobs to achieve are not getting done, and it's trying to be pawned off on you, hold them accountable to that. Meaning, don't do other people's work. So what happens if you do that?
It makes my life harder.
How so?
So if I just clean up people's messes, things get done, and then I can move on to achieving the goals that I have done or I have set for myself. Whereas if I say no, then I have to deal with the situation of saying no, and that takes away from being able to do what I actually need to do. But it also feeds the problem.
It
when I
does. Then they're expecting it over and over and over again. So it's a great example for how all relationships work, because if, you know, in a house, if two people live together and one of them keeps refusing to not clean, and the other one goes, well, I'll just clean every single time because you're not doing it. And if I want to get anything else done, I have to clean first because I can't do anything if it's not clean. Then what ends up happening? The house is clean, but the resentment builds and the relationship ends up failing. So definitely what you're headed for, if you keep up the dynamic of cleaning up other people's stuff to be able to accomplish what you want, is greater resentment for your coworkers and feeling overwhelmed and not being at that job anymore. Just like in a relationship, cleaning up, the resentment builds, you break up. Because no relationship can withstand resentment that builds up and builds up and builds up. So then we would ask you the other question, which is, how much do you want to keep your job?
Well, I think we all know the answer to that question. I need it. I mean, I really like paying, you know, heating and food, but I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, I do want to keep it because it affords me to do the things I actually want to do. Right. So
hold people accountable.
yeah.
And here's the great thing about holding people accountable. When you hold people accountable, they either become accountable or they fall away. Because eventually some type of hammer will come down on them. So first you hold someone accountable, and then if they still don't take accountability for themselves, then doesn't someone above you then hold them accountable?
No, that's the problem.
So the person above you isn't holding anyone accountable either?
No.
And holding themselves accountable?
No, not really.
So you're doing the work for the person above you and the people below you?
Yeah, and it's a dynamic that I'm repeating. It happened in my last position too. It was more egregious in my last position. It's happened slowly in this one, but it's like they realize, oh, Leah will do it, and so I'll just have Leah do it.
Right, which means the only way to break that dynamic is to quit doing it.
Yeah.
You've only got two directions to go with it. Either you hold them accountable for doing their own work, or you do it for them. If you do it for them, they're going to keep piling it on you, and eventually it's going to be too much. You hold them accountable to doing it. It's going to get chaotic and messy and stagnant, but something's going to blow up within that, and someone's going to go, or maybe a few people are going to go, whatever. But at least something will start to happen to where you've created a boundary that goes, I have my job description. This is what I'm accountable for doing. You have your job description. This is what you're accountable for doing. And it's just that simple. And I'm not moving outside of it anymore. Those are the only choices you have.
Yeah.
Both of them suck. And in one scenario, you end up quitting. In the other scenario, worst case scenario, you would get fired for not doing other people's work.
It's not happening.
Yeah, so.
Thank you. That was super helpful. You gave me also a lot of ideas of ways that I can have these conversations with my supervisor now too, though, right? Like,
And don't you
How-
have someone coming in there to clean up?
hmm?
Don't you have someone coming in there to clean up things?
Yeah, but that that's now turning into something else too, because he wants a job with us. So
Oh,
it's always something.
so does everyone at your job have clarity of their own job descriptions?
They should. Whether or not they act like they know them is a totally different thing. Yeah, I think people's roles are defined clearly.
So just keep reinforcing their well-defined role. And this is a great example. So if you really feel the energy that we're talking about here, when you keep reinforcing somebody's well-defined role, that is actually a boundary. Because you're saying, I'm not going to take responsibility for your role. I know your role and I know you're capable of doing it. Here you go. I believe in you to be an independent and autonomous individual. That is a boundary. And let's talk about what that boundary really, really is, because it doesn't matter if you're in a work environment or in a marriage or a friendship, or it doesn't matter really what dynamic it is. The ability to stand in that place of, you're encroaching upon an area that isn't mine. So when you try to put something on me that's not mine, you're actually overstepping a boundary, or you're violating a boundary. And what is the natural and healthy response to a violation of a boundary? The healthy response to a violation of a boundary is actually anger. And most people actually do have anger, and then they feel guilty about having the anger. But if we don't go into the guilt about having the anger, or the rhetoric that goes on in the head of like, oh, being angry is a bad thing, I shouldn't be angry, blah, 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 and just really look at, I'm pissed. Why am I pissed? Oh, because my natural boundary is being violated. Then it is our responsibility as the person who now is allowing our anger to communicate with us, to go, if a boundary is being violated, I'm not cool with it. And you need to get back in your own lane. I don't want anything to do with your lane. You have your lane. You're capable of your lane. Figure it out. That energy is called self-respect, and it's also called respect for the other person. Though society doesn't understand it that way, because so many people have relationships that enable each other and manipulate each other. So kindness is now some kind of bullshit of taking responsibility for other people's stuff, or expecting someone else to take responsibility for your stuff, and then that person's nice or kind. But in fact, kindness is the ability to go, that's yours. I believe that you're able to do that. You're fully capable. Have fun. And kindness towards self is, this is my space. You're not allowed to encroach upon it. Like, if you enter into my space and you start to cause chaos in my energetic space, I'm going to push your ass out. This is my sacred space. It's mine. And through self-worth, self-respect, self-esteem, I can easily push you out. And I can easily not feel guilty in doing so, because it's mine. And no one has a right to infringe upon that which is mine. And it's not unkind for me to be able to say, this is mine, this is yours. It's just called honesty. And the ability to honor self. And if more people could genuinely honor self while honoring someone else and see it clearly, then relationships would be much healthier. And we want everyone to really comprehend what we're saying, because there's all kinds of teachings about boundaries and how, you make a boundary with your words and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, your words are a follow through of a boundary, but the beginning space of a boundary is actually self-respect and self-accountability. And when we're truly in a space of self-respect and we're truly in a space of self-accountability, we also expect the same of others. So, and what we mean by that is you easily see in another when they're not practicing it. So when you perceive in another, you're not practicing very much self-respect, and you're certainly not practicing any respect toward me, call them out on it. I believe in your ability to be self-respecting, and I believe in your ability to be respectful of me, and I'm enforcing it right now. Right? Mary, were you asking a question, or were you on the phone or something? Okay.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Angel, you've spoken before about the energy of people saying the right things, being so politically correct, being so nice and kind to everyone, and yet the energy is not that. The energy is egotistical, do what I say or you're out. Threatening, intimidating, whatever. So I've just never forgotten that this was from your last seminar about how, like, the two-faced side where the energy is quite different from what they say publicly. I've got a new boss like that, and I cannot take it. I cannot take it. It's just no honesty. It drives me insane.
Yeah, and everything we're talking about today still has to do with honesty. And it's in some ways an even deeper level of honesty, because It's the ability to really, really be honest with oneself about what one is agreeing to. When you really get into relationships that have any kind of parasitic elements, then you have to ask yourself, what am I agreeing to? And allow yourself to really look into that. Like, look deeply into that. What am I agreeing to? Because there's always some type of agreement that's being made. And the more that we accept dysfunction, even when we know something is dysfunctional, we're actually agreeing to the dysfunctional interaction. And we're usually agreeing to the dysfunctional interaction because of something we're afraid to lose, which is manipulative. So when we get really, really honest about choices that we're making or dysfunctions that we're agreeing to because of something that we're afraid to lose, whether it's someone liking us or someone admiring us or someone giving us money, or who knows. When we're choosing and agreeing to dysfunction in order to get a thing or to not lose a thing, then we are agreeing to being manipulative. And if we're agreeing to being manipulative, then we're definitely agreeing to being dishonest. And if we're agreeing to being dishonest, then guess what's at stake? Guess what's being diminished? Our self-respect, our self-esteem, and our self-worth. So you know what's not going to get better? Our genuine energetic boundaries. In fact, we're agreeing to the demolition of our core wholeness. So we have to start thinking in an honest way in regard to that, because something is always being sacrificed. And we always have to ask, what is being sacrificed? Because often when we make a decision, when we make an agreement to stay within some type of dysfunctional dynamic because of something we're afraid to lose, all we're looking at is the sacrifice of what we're afraid to lose. That's the only sacrifice we're looking at. And we see this constantly, especially in marriages, mainly women, where the focus is on what they will lose, status, money, house, whatever, all of the, usual investments of marriage. But not looking at the other side of that, which is what's being sacrificed by staying and agreeing to this dysfunctional dynamic. What's being sacrificed? Because something's always getting sacrificed. And what it often is what we're saying: self-respect, self-esteem, autonomy, self-reliance, self-worth. And somehow those are less important than a house, than money, than some kind of status. Nonsense. So what happens? You can do this in your mind. You can go, okay, I know there's sacrifices on either end. So let's examine them. What are they? If I go this route, these are the sacrifices. If I go this route, these are the sacrifices. So if I choose to uplift and uphold and cultivate and salvage and hold sacred my self-respect, my self-esteem, my self-worth, my autonomy, my self-reliance, if I uphold those, then I sacrifice my house, my status, my car, money. Like, listen to yourself say it. Because when you listen to yourself say it, when you get really honest with what's really going on, and you listen to yourself, and you actually identify why you're choosing to remain in dysfunctional parasitic dynamics, when you hear yourself say it, you will be able to choose something that is absolutely more in your favor. Unless you've already diminished yourself so far that these things don't matter. If you can point this out to yourself and still go, well, I'll still take the money over the self-respect, then you know that you've screwed yourself. 7 ways to Sunday. That you've already been in some kind of dynamic that's eaten you alive. And from that point, you have to ask yourself, do I have the will to build myself back up, to become a human being again? And if I don't, can I? Is there a way to get it? And if you're able to really do that in any situation and really examine what the dynamics truly are and what you're really sacrificing in regarding the choices that you're making. So you've seen how we've taken a couple of these situations, gone, here's your 2 choices. You guys can do that for yourselves. You can really sink down into it and go, these are the choices I have. I can go this route. And so much of the time, the choices that you have suck. Like, every choice sucks. That is a hallmark of shitty dynamics. Anytime you get deep into shitty dynamics, any choice you make within the dynamic sucks. That's the problem with shitty dynamics. So a lot of times people will avoid some type of way to solve a problem because they're convinced that in the solving of the problem, it's worse than just sitting and stewing and stagnating in the current dysfunction, which is an absolute lie people tell themselves. But when you really lay out your choices and you accept, because I'm in a crappy dynamic, every choice is going to suck, I can at least accept that part of it and then play it out. Play it out. We do this with our clients a lot. Play it out 6 months. Play it out 12 months. Play it out 2 years. Play it out 5 years. And see where you are. And if you move forward in this example we're giving about a hypothetical marriage situation, and you move self-respect out 5 years, where someone goes, you know what, I'm going to honor self-respect and I'm going to cultivate it and I'm not going to sacrifice it anymore. Guess who that person ends up being 5 years in the future? A badass. As opposed to, oh, I'm going to keep sacrificing it. Guess where they end up 5 years down the road? They might have more money, but they have no self-esteem, no self-worth, and they hate themselves. So you have to ask yourself, in that situation, would I rather have to work harder to recreate wealth and have my self-esteem intact, or would I rather accumulate wealth through dysfunction and have no positive sense of self anymore? And when you hear yourself actually walk through and say to yourself your real choices, the choice becomes clear, even if it's uncomfortable. And the more you practice it, and it really is simple, because the The idea of boundaries when one's in a fractured state and is used to allowing people to walk all over them and use them and such, that space feels chaotic and difficult, and creating boundaries in that space is impossible. It's just, flimsy fences. But choosing to hone in and focus on self-respect, self-worth, self-esteem, choosing to ask oneself all the time, is this strengthening my self-respect or diminishing it? Is this strengthening my self-esteem or diminishing it? If I have a choice to paint or watch TV, which one strengthens my self-respect? Which one strengthens my self-esteem? That's just a simple one, right? But if you're asking that question constantly and you consistently choose self-respect, do you know what naturally happens to your boundaries? They get stronger. You don't even have to think about it. And the same people that would usually walk all over you or consider that you'll do whatever they want will stop feeling like they can do that because of an energy that you put off. It literally happens this way. The higher someone's self-respect, the higher someone's self-esteem, the higher someone's self-worth, the less that person deals with anyone trying to take advantage of them. I know this from experience because I used to be someone who everyone walked all over, and I made the choices that I'm talking to you guys about right now. And I still think about these choices to this day. And I still have interactions that are extremely uncomfortable with plenty of people, especially people that I really love. And I know when I'm doing it, I'm risking them never talking to me again. And sometimes they don't. But I also know that by doing it, I'm strengthening my own self-respect, and I'm strengthening their ability to be able to perceive what self-respect and respect for others is. And if they choose to accept it and integrate it, they will become better because of it. And at this point in my life, I hardly have anyone who tries to take advantage of me. They don't dare. They don't want to. They don't want to get any close to that because they don't want to hear whatever I would have to say if I perceive them doing it. And it is a much, much, much better space to be in than where I used to be. And the people that still can't honor it because they're just so far from being able to comprehend what that even is, what self-respect or respect for others even is, I really don't have contact with them. I do not keep those kind of people in my life, no matter who they are. And because of that, I actually have a really beautiful life with really beautiful relationships. I'm very, very, very content with my relationships, but I've worked really, really hard to get to where I am. And I've put myself through tons of uncomfortable situations. In situations where I thought I would be homeless. But when you choose self-respect first, the way you win in your own life is, it can't even be explained. You have to experience it for yourself. Everything responds to it. Everything. And that's the real boundary. And that's the real way to not have any parasitic relationships with human beings. Because those who don't want to be accountable for themselves will always go find someone who will take accountability for them. You just have to ask yourself, do you want to be the one? Do you want to be that one? Life is only so many years. It's a shame to waste it on those who use you. Well, guys, we are at 2 hours. Have you enjoyed this topic?
Yes.
A lot to ponder and a lot to take in. Thank you.
Welcome.
I also love the timing of this because you've given me so much to think about, and I like that it's happening at this time of year because it's like, all right, I'm gonna get my stuff together and get ready to, be serious, put some set some deadlines for things in the upcoming new year. So this is awesome. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. And it's a great thing to ponder at holidays with all of the family dynamics.
Definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome. We didn't read the chat. Make sure we didn't miss anything.
So Angel, this was recorded, so you'll post like the recording so we can go back and
Yeah.
listen to this.
Yeah, and Mary, I'm not sure why you're not getting the emails. I sent out 2 emails with the Zoom link, and you're not getting it when I send it out as a recording.
Nope.
Oh,
Oh, well, I got the one as a recording because you sent that to me via messenger, but emails, no.
okay.
So
All right.
maybe we can figure out what happened.
Yeah. Did you look in your spam?
Yeah, of course. No, nothing
All right.
for today.
Well, we'll make sure it gets to you. And if any of you don't receive the recording, just reach out to me personally. I'll make sure you get it. Okay. Thanks, guys, for being a
Thanks
part.
so much. We got a
Thank
lot of
you.
practicing to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Good night. Mm.